Hello, and welcome to this installment of our virtual conference series with a focus on freight transportation and logistics. I'm Greg Pendy, a member of the SPAC and Disruptive Technology Equity Research team at Chardan Capital Markets. As always, I'll start with some disclosures. During this call, we will not be discussing Chardan research. Any discussions about research should be coordinated between a participant and their respective salesperson. Our compliance team has asked me to read this statement for the investor call. By participating in this call, our speakers attest that they have made Chardan aware of any potential conflicts and they will not discuss any material, non-public, or confidential information that they are aware of that may breach their legal, regulatory, or fiduciary responsibilities to any parties. So with those disclosures out of the way, it's my pleasure to introduce the team of Freightos. Today we have the Chief Executive Officer, Zvi Schreiber. We have the Chief Financial Officer, Shalev, and we have the Head of Investor Relations, Anat Earon-Heilborn. Team, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks. Let's just start here with some big picture questions, and then we can delve into some more recent pressing events in the industry. But just from a big picture perspective, for those that aren't familiar with Freightos, can you just go over your platform and how you are, within the global shipping can become easier and more transparent through digitalization? And then also just walk us through the traditional process that a lot of customers would be experiencing and how your platform disrupts the space.
Sure, Greg. First, it's always worth remembering just how huge this industry is. 90% of the products that you buy in the US and in most countries are imported. So a huge part of the global economy is import and export, and therefore a huge part of the global economy is powered by international shipping. Given how big and how important it is, people who are not from the industry would really be shocked at how manual it is. So still today, I mean, we've started to change it and some others have started to change it. So the digitalization process has started. But still today, in most cases, somebody wants to ship some goods, let's say China to the US, or it doesn't matter, Bangladesh to France. They're calling up typically a freight forwarding company. Freight forwarders are like the travel agents who arrange everything. Quite often there's a second freight forwarding company involved, one at the origin, one at the destination, and they in turn speak to the carriers. And very typically this is done with emails, phone calls, human interaction with the first freight forwarder, human interaction from the origin freight forwarder to the destination freight forwarder, human interaction to the actual carriers. And you end up waiting a day or two or three just for a price quote. And the price quote tends to be inaccurate and have a lot of surcharges and non-binding. It's always sort of subject to change, And that's still how most shipping is done today, really quite surprising. So our goal is, you said disrupt, but I prefer to say, to innovate and modernize the space, because we're very much, although we're looking to make significant improvements, we're doing it very much in partnership with the carriers, with the freight forwarders, with the importers and exporters. So we definitely see this as a partnership to innovate. And we're bringing some of the same efficiencies that you've seen in passenger travel for 25 years already, where all the communication is electronic, it's instant, so people can get instant price quotes, accurate binding price quotes, confirmed capacity, and just bring the same benefits of efficiency and transparency that we've seen in other industries for a couple of decades.
Right, that's very helpful. And then just as you look at the global landscape, what do you identify as some of the global mega trends that will shape your industry over the next few years? And then just further expanding on that, how have you positioned Freightos to benefit from these?
Yeah, in terms of trends, let's talk about some of the business sort of trends in global trade firstly, and then we can mention maybe a couple of technology trends. In terms of trends in global trade, I mean, global trade remains a huge part of the economy and a huge part of the physical economy in particular. We're seeing since COVID and also with some of the current politics, but mainly since COVID, we're seeing some diversification away from China. China is still to some extent the world's factory, but less than it was. People are trying to make sure that not all of their supply chain is in China and that they're also relying on other countries in Asia or on other locations. So that's a clear trend where people are trying to diversify their supply chain and not be dependent purely on China. Another major trend is quite new trend in the last year or two is direct to consumer international e-commerce. So we've seen it going back for a few years with AliExpress, but more recently in the last year or two, Shein and Temu becoming very significant players, particularly in air cargo, delivering goods directly to the consumer, all the way from China to the consumer in the United States and Europe. But that's quite different. In the past, goods were always coming sort of in bulk in containers to warehouses in the West and then getting sent last mile. Here they're sending individual packages internationally. So that's an important trend as well. Another trend, of course, is paying attention to the environment, measuring carbon footprints, trying to manage carbon footprints. That's becoming more and more important. When we talk about technology, I've mentioned, of course, AI is something which we're looking at a lot and everyone's looking at in all industries. In our industry, the IoT, Internet of Things, is very important because you'd be shocked how hard it is to just find out where your container is. Containers are big, 40-foot, 40 like a size of a room, and people put tens of thousands of dollars of goods in them, and yet often they just don't know where the container is. Whereas you've got a small package from Amazon, you know exactly where, which is worth $50, and you know exactly where it is. So Internet of Things is finally coming on board to track those things. Another trend people were watching, a couple of trends which maybe failed or disappointed, I think, is blockchain. We were not a big proponent of that, but there was a lot of talk that would be the way that transactions are monitored. I think that's been disappointing. It added more complexity than value. And also 3D printing. There was this dream that people were talking about that maybe you won't need to import goods anymore because you'll just print them and in your home or in a local factory. That's still very, very niche and hasn't become a big trend, I would say.
That's very helpful. I guess, how would you describe then the overall industry's competitive landscape right
now? Are you asking about the competition in I guess you're asking about our competition or about competition in the logistics space or both?
Yeah, let's address it with people using the legacy traditional methods as well as maybe some new players that you're seeing in your space with a similar offering.
Okay, great. So look, there's 100,000 freight forwarding companies in the world. The biggest ones do tens of billions of dollars. So that's a very big market. Most of that is still done the traditional way, but I don't know. We certainly don't see them as competitors. We see them as customers and partners. We're helping them to digitalize and do things in a more modern way. Same with the airlines. The cargo airlines have been important partners of ours, and we're helping them to digitalize. But still, so our biggest competitor in terms of that customer base is Microsoft Excel. If people aren't using Freightos, most often they're doing things traditionally. They're doing emails, they're sending prices and spreadsheets. So that remains sort of the main alternative. Within the digitalization landscape, we're not alone. I think we're the only company, and I want to emphasize here, I'm talking about air and ocean, I'm talking about international freight. If you look at domestic trucking, there are several companies trying to digitalize domestic trucking in the US and elsewhere, but we don't see them as competitors because we're focused on international freight, air and ocean. And there are some competitors. We have one competitor who's also trying to digitalize airlines, and a different one also trying to do data because we provide the Freightos terminal with a lot of data on pricing for air, pricing for ocean. We have our indexes. And then we have a software for freight forwarders to automate their quotes. So in each aspect of what we do, we face different competitors. There is no competitor who's got that whole breadth and who's trying to, really digitalize the air cargo and the freight forwarding function and the communication with the importer and exporter. So I think Freightos is still really quite unique in digitalizing the whole stack, if you will.
That's very helpful. And then I guess just one final big picture question, just notable macro issues that you're facing right now. I know you've spoken about some of them, but there's no shortage. Can you just go over what the bigger ones are and how you're viewing them?
Yeah, you're talking about trends in the industry right now, or disruptions that are occurring, like
Yeah,
in the
I
Red
mean,
Sea. Is that the
I
question?
guess things that are really kind of moving global shipping rates, I think would be
Yeah.
maybe the most helpful.
Yeah, so the most obvious one, of course, is the Red Sea disruption, the Houthi attacks since November, which have pretty much closed the Suez Canal for international trade. And that's basically unprecedented. You may remember that during COVID, the canal was closed, but only for a couple of weeks when there was a ship stuck. And now you've had the canal. Most shipping companies reluctant to use the Suez Canal since November. And 30% of world trade travels through the Suez Canal. So that's really very, very disruptive. Most of the ships, container ships, oil tankers, other bulk shipping are circumventing right around Africa. That's adding a lot of time and fuel and cost to the international shipping. And it's caused rates to go up not only in the Suez route, but even Pacific rates, trans-Pacific rates from Asia to the US West Coast, which don't go through the Suez Canal, have still been affected substantially. We've seen rates going up 3 or 4x, container ocean rates since November, fluctuating around that. But that's still, to put it in context, if it sounds pretty scary for rates to go up 3x or 4x, during the worst part of COVID, rates were going up 15 or 20x. So this is still, although it's a big disruption, it's still quite minor compared to what we saw during the worst times of COVID. Of course, much more recently, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, the tragedy in the port of Baltimore, which has closed most of that port. Not all the port, part of the port is open, but most of that port is closed. That hasn't affected container shipping much, but it has affected what's called ro-ro shipping, vehicles, roll-on, roll-off vehicle shipping. That's not a sector that we play in, but that sector has been somewhat impacted because Baltimore was a big port for vehicles.
Great. Now let's dig into some company-specific questions. Can you just go over your technology for those not very familiar, and just how your solution is unique relative to people who are dealing with the current status quo in terms of support, bookings, and quotes?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think if I want to use a metaphor, then the experience we give to the importer and exporter is a little bit like Booking.com, which many people use, or Expedia, or Kayak, or Skyscanner. It's a single site where you can get instant price quotes from many providers and choose and book and pay. So it's a booking and payment platform. We actually have two layers to that. We have Freightos, where you can book and pay with the freight forwarders, and then behind the scenes, we actually have a platform which we call Web Cargo, which connects the freight forwarders to the airlines, and starting a little bit with the ocean liners, although that's going slower. With airlines, we've got quite some volume there. For those who know the travel industry, Web Cargo is pretty much parallel to Amadeus or Sabre. If you're not familiar with those companies, you can look them up. They've been around for decades. And if you search your inbox, you'll find that many of the airline tickets you buy today are actually issued. In the small print, you'll see that they're actually issued by Amadeus or Sabre as the communication platform. So, and that's our platform. So our platform is really booking and payments and all the optimizations around that, the routing and the pricing around that. So it's really just giving the modern experience, instant pricing, instant routing, instant booking. But as well as our platform, and you'll see this also in our financial results, we have a solutions business, and that's software. So to support the use of the platform, we sell software mainly to freight forwarding companies, software as a service, SaaS. And we have a growing data business. So because we've got all this transactional volume, Freightos actually has the best available data in the world of what's the price on any given day for shipping a container, what's the price on any given day for shipping air cargo. And so we publish our indexes, the FBX index for ocean, the FAX index, both published on the Freightos terminal, which is becoming really a leading product for tracking what's going on in the world of international shipping.
Right. And can you just help us understand more on the network effect that your business has? Just discuss how more participants. I know you've reached scale quite a while back on the airline space, but just how more participants and how that flywheel works.
Yeah, I mean, marketplaces in general, platforms or marketplaces have a wonderful sort of two-sided network effect. And the reason for that really is, I mean, let's take an example. Let's say, think about eBay as an analogy. eBay, I don't think they have any particularly interesting technology. You could probably build their site in a few months if you had to. But you know, when you go to eBay to buy some, you know, some specific product, some teapots, you know, you're not going because of their technology. You're going because that's where all the sellers hang out. And if somebody's selling a antique teapot, probably it's on eBay. And similarly, if you're a seller, you don't go to eBay because they've got fantastic features or algorithms. You go to eBay because your best chance to sell your stamp collection is on eBay because that's where all the buyers hang out. So you get this wonderful, you know, when you think about it, for eBay, their customers are their products. You go there as a buyer because of the sellers, and you go there as a seller because of the buyers. And we have the same network effect or flywheel in our marketplace. We see it most strongly between the freight forwarders and the airlines. Every time we add an airline, our product becomes even more attractive for the freight forwarders. So more freight forwarders come, and every time the freight forwarders come as the buyers, we become a really important channel for the airlines to sell. And so we've had this wonderful flywheel where every month or two we add a major airline. Every day we add more freight forwarders. And it just grows very consistently. We just announced our latest KPIs today or yesterday, and you know, you just see, I think it was it 16 quarters of you know, of consistent growth, and that's, you know, just very steady because of this you know, effect of buyer brings seller, seller brings buyer.
And then just on that topic a little bit, digging a little bit, can you discuss the penetration rates then with, say, as you add a new airline, what you typically see on average in terms of the volume that you're using, that they're working with you on in year 1, 2, and 3, and how that kind of curve grows?
Yeah. Yeah, so for anyone who's actually taking a look at our investor presentation, I think hopefully there'll be a link to it. If you look on slide 17, we track the growth of our cohorts of buyers, of freight forwarders. And, on slide 18, we track the cohort growth of the sellers, the airlines. And it's a beautiful thing to see because, you know, some companies, they bring on some customers and then the cohorts of customers join in a certain month, sort of there's attrition, and then by 1 or 2 years later, there's not much left of them. We've got the very opposite, where when people start buying on our platform, they continue buying and they buy more and more and more. So if you look at the chart after, for example, 10 quarters, the same cohort of freight forwarders who start to book in 1 quarter, after 2.5 years, they're growing between 700 and over 1,000% more. So they've actually grown 10x with us, and that's economically, that's wonderful because it costs us a little bit to market to them in the first place. But once they're on, we typically spend nothing or almost nothing on them, and they just book more and more and more. And so that's a very, very healthy growth dynamic. And a similar thing on the airline side, where you see also after 20 months, for example, you see between 500 and over 1,000% growth. So the same airline, they come on, they start getting a trickle of bookings, and then they get more and more and more. And we've had 100% retention of airlines. We've never, ever lost an airline. And you can see why, because once the airlines join WebCargo and they start getting bookings, they just get more and more bookings. And, you know, everybody wants business. Nobody's going to walk away from that.
And then how important is it with, you know, gaining trust of the airlines in this space maybe from a security perspective, but just overall seeing a smooth transaction go through?
Yeah, I mean, you know, great question. It's very, very critical. We become a mission critical infrastructure for the airlines, for the freight forwarders, especially once they're along that cohort curve. They start to use us for big volumes. You know, we have airlines where we may be well over well over 10% of their global business, and in Europe, where the growth has been strongest, we maybe a lot more than that, maybe 20% or more. So this is absolutely critical for them. And yeah, we've worked over many years to gain their trust by keeping the data 100% secure. We've never had a data leak. Keeping the system uptime 99.99%, or at least certainly aiming for very, very high uptime, very, very secure data. And of course it gets easier because now, when people join the platform and they see that, American Airlines is on, and Delta and Lufthansa and Turkish and Qatar and Emirates, they see that many of the biggest airlines in the world have trusted us for years, or same with the biggest freight forwarders or the biggest importers and exporters, people like Electrolux who use us, and, they've talked about it publicly. So our reputation, becomes stronger over time for sure.
Great. And then just for those who are looking at your company right now and trying to understand, what are some of the key metrics you think that they should be focusing on that you put out for investors? And just can you walk us through kind of the puts and takes on some of those metrics, whether they be GBV or transactions?
Yeah, I mean, for the reason that we discussed earlier, Greg, when you look at a marketplace, the product is the liquidity, right? You can think of the stock market as well. So the first thing you should look at, even before, of course, in the long term, revenue and eventually EBITDA are absolutely critical. That's what a business is about. But the way we get there is by being a liquid marketplace, by being the platform where transactions occur. So that's why we lead, even before we announce revenue each quarter, we announce the liquidity of our platform, which is how many transactions occurred and the value of those transactions, the GBV. I actually recommend, although investors tend to look at the GBV, gross booking value, or some other marketplaces call it gross merchandise value, same idea. Although, of course, investors think in dollar terms, so they look first at the GBV, and that makes sense because that's how much revenue we're driving to the sellers. That's how much procurement our buyers are trusting us with. So it's a dollar value. However, it is subject to fluctuation because rates, as we mentioned earlier with the Red Sea, the rates in the market can change a lot. And so you may see GBV ticking up or down, or even sharply moving up or down, nothing to do with our liquidity, but just because of the rates in the marketplace. And that's why I always recommend investors first look at the number of transactions as a measure of liquidity, which isn't influenced by the price level in the market.
Great, that's very helpful. So I guess with those key metrics, kind of, can you just go over? And I think you touched on it earlier. You have two different business streams, but we'll focus on just sort of the platform, but the underlying business model and long term, kind of what drives the puts and takes for growth.
Sure, and that's a perfect cue to introduce Ron, our CFO.
Yes.
And let me hand this one over to him.
Sure. Thanks, Tzvi, and Greg, great to be here. So I'll first refer to, you mentioned that we've published our KPIs, and indeed, those are the key indicators of what we track and how we see if we're, in a healthy growth position. And for example, Q1 24, which we just published, number of transactions reached closer to 300,000 transaction, continuation of the growth that we are seeing. Same with the gross booking value, the number of buyer users continuing to grow. The number of carriers have reached 49 carriers already that are getting orders from us. So all of that eventually moves towards the business model that we track and see how we perform. And when we're looking at our models of reaching profitability and long-term visibility, we do see that the trend that we are forecasting will be transactions in GBV will be growing between 20 to 30% year on year. And with that, our revenues growth will be between 25 to 30% year on year. And that's what we're seeing constantly in the past years, definitely in transactions and GBV that are like an indication of where the revenues will be eventually. As for the gross profits margins, right now we're at 70%, which is as well is growing really nicely as comparison to previous years. And we are estimating to reach between 70 to 80. So right now we're at 70. Mature companies that are selling either SaaS or transactions can hit closer to 80%. We believe that we can get there based on the assumptions and modeling that we have. And all of that together with, I would say, getting a grip around operational expenses too, will bring us to adjusted EBITDA margin of between 8 to 12 percentage points per year of growth, which as well will bring us to profitability towards the end of 2026.
Great. And then that's very helpful. And then just one final one. How would you think about, strategic alliances or consolidation in your industry?
And maybe I'm not sure if Ron mentioned, but there's a summary of what he was talking about on slide 26.
Correct.
Just following on. Look, I think for us, we do have some partnerships with other technology companies, but actually for us, the key is to partner with the players in the industry. So we work very closely with the airlines. Some of the airlines are shareholders and investors, including Qatar Airways, which is actually the #1 cargo airline in the world, who've become an important partner. But also others who are not shareholders are very close partners with us. We work with them on new initiatives like digitalizing interlining, that's airlines booking with airlines, digitalizing payments. Of course, some of the freight forwarders we work with are very are keen to innovate. So not many, but some of the freight forwarders we work with are now building portals with us to sell online and actually digitalize their own sales. And so for us, and of course the importers and exporters as well. So for us, our most important sort of strategic alliances are with our customers, helping them through their digitalization journey, let's say.
Great. Well, that wraps it up for now. I want to thank Zvi, Ran, and Anat for joining us and sharing the story with us. It seems like an exciting time, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to discuss Freightos with us.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.